All right. So we are giving this a shot again. I am trying to both record as well as live stream to YouTube at the same time. And I'm supposed to be able to do that. But I just got a lovely message. Heather, you can't see it on this end, but it says there's a problem. Something went wrong. So whatever. We will see what we can do. Hi everyone. Welcome to the Sober Witch Life.
Hello.
We are trying some new technology. And yeah, needless to say, if you happen to catch a weird episode on YouTube, like maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I guess it was all funky and strange. And we're back trying to test again because, yeah, that's kind of how I am. Just figure it out on the fly and see if we can make it work. But welcome, everybody. It's been a while, and it's been one heck of a wild and crazy year, like the last 6 months, as my dear partner said. And so we're going to talk today a little bit about the change to the podcast, number one, and then we're going to jump into conversation. And it's going to be a bit about that energy, and it's going to be a bit about what you can do to shift energy. Because for those of us that are in recovery, we always kind of want to be in the best energy we can. So we are bringing the podcast back. We're going to try to do this weekly, and it's not just going to be me moving forward. You see that you got some other folks on here, not just me, not just Dan. We're also welcoming Heather, one of the recovery allies that's part of Illuminate and the Recovery Coven. And the other recovery allies are going to be able to come on as well when time permits, right? Because it's kind of all about doing what is right for you in recovery. And sometimes it might not be right for them to join us. So hopefully we'll be here weekly for you. You can catch us on YouTube. You can catch us on Spotify, all of the major podcasting platforms. And if you can't catch us there, well, then just be patient because we'll be back. All right. Yeah, you see, welcome Dan and Heather. I'm excited I'm not here alone by myself tonight. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Here, yep.
So I thought, I know Heather, you weren't able to join the recovery circle with us tonight, but it was a great conversation, and there's a couple of things that came up as we started, and it was the star card that we pulled today, which felt like this very different shift of energy. I very different. And if I went and looked back at all of the cards that we've pulled over the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, none of them have been the equivalent of like the star. And so I thought we would talk about what's it felt like the last 6 months. What has energy felt like since the beginning of the year, right? Because we just hit the summer solstice here. So we've got about 6 months since we would have celebrated Yule in December. What's that energy felt like?
Mine has been rough since probably about the holidays. And, bouncing around with cobwebs in my mind. Yeah, it's been a little rough and just feels like it's finally shifting.
I kind of feel the same. I've had a lot going on in the last 6 months myself, and it's been different shifts, not just a singular shift. I feel like it's been multiple shifts for me, different things happening, different things coming into my life, different triggers. And such, it accumulated a couple weeks ago when I had to go in the hospital for health issues, which was unusual for me because I'm usually pretty healthy with no issues. But I think life was catching up to me. The triggers were catching up to me and such. So I've went through a period of these, I want to call it tribulations, I think sometimes. And now it seems like, I agree with Dan, it seems to sort of been tapering off a little bit more. It's been a little bit easier to handle the energy shifts now. So it's not been so overwhelming.
Yeah, it's a blessing. It makes me think it's a blessing and a curse. And I've said this with a lot of people before. When you are a sensitive, right? When we identify as a witch, highly spiritual person, we often have a sensitivity to kind of the energetic shifts and changes within the world. And I'm not a professional astrologist or anything, but I've got friends, I've got a handful of them that I talk to, and just collectively the energetic, astrologically speaking, human design speaking, has been really big shifts, and the feeling that I get heavily, interestingly enough, that kind of came forward as we started talking was, it feels like 6 months of grief.
Yeah.
Right? 6 months of grief, that messiness of grief, that waves of emotional shifting and changing of grief, and trying to let things go and yet honor what we're releasing at the same time. It's a hard place to sit in. Can you guys think? I mean, was there anything, if you were to go back that 6 months, was there anything in particular that
I had a lot of work. Well, I did have a lot of work stress, um, but it was more than that too. I'm realizing now my brain was just feeling scrambled. And I think the work stress came from just being scrambled in that way, and it just compounded it even more. And I had a work trip that spun me off on I don't know what the hell happened on that trip, man, but it was not good. I was doing so well before that. I felt very isolated there, and I hadn't been the same since. Like that trip
mm,
really messed me up good. It was very strange.
wow, I didn't think about that until you just said that, but yeah,
Yeah, I was at this place of just beautiful clarity for the first time in my life, I think. And after I went on that trip, I was like a different person afterward.
that is, yeah, what a beautiful reflection though. How about you, Heather? Anything particular that's kind of stick out?
I would have to agree. Mine was also work related. It was a accumulation of multiple triggers at work where it was a very toxic work environment and I just had enough of it. And it kind of like catapulted me into like the new year in January when I just literally just said I was done with corporate job because I didn't like how it made me feel. I didn't and like Dan said, I was like I felt like a different person. Like I wasn't who I used to be. It was like there was a definite shift in that time frame. It was probably around that time frame, around like October-ish area, where there was that definite clarity moment, like Dan said. So it was a very similar experience for me in a different way, though, with the way my work was going. And it was just a series of, I felt like it was almost like universe working in for me in that regard, even though, everything had to topple down before everything was rebuilt. That's what I felt like. And then when it accumulated in January, when I quit, when I decided that I was quitting corporate and then moved on. And then February, there was still it was that period from January to February. It was like, I'm really glad this is ending. I'm really glad this is ending. And I actually ended it quite earlier than I had anticipated. And then it kind of shifted and then catapulted me in another direction from there. So you went to the moment like you were saying about grief, where you were grieving a job that had been me for 27 years,
Mm,
and then it catapulted me into a new person. And now when I reflect back on it, and it's been, since I've been out of that job, it's been 4 months now. It's like it feels like it was a different reality. Like it was a surreal moment. Like, why was I even there? Like, what was that chapter in my life? It was very strange. And it's like I don't really know how to describe it. You don't feel right after that. You felt different. And that was and I just come to realize that probably in the next, probably like the last month or so, I just really started thinking about that. I was like, oh my gosh, like what? And it got to the point where I was just telling my husband, I was like, you know what? I forget even some of my coworkers' names that I've worked with for years. It's like so weird, like where did this go? Like what happened to this stuff? Because I'd worked with them for so many years. It's like, but now it's like they're like memories that are kind of like half forgotten now. It's very strange. It was a very strange feeling. And that was just like probably about a month ago when I started really reflecting on that. It was very strange.
I feel you on that. It's been a year since I walked out of my corporate job, and it feels like a different life, like a memory that exists in some kind of storybook,
Hmm.
like a total different dimension of
Like another
self.
dimension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. It's a very strange, and as you were talking and I'm listening, Heather, I was thinking this is also often how they describe trauma. Like
Yeah.
when you get out of trauma into
Mhm.
healing, that's kind of the way that it feels and it is described afterwards. And that was like, yeah, I mean, what a, the last 6 months. I was thinking for me, if there was a certain, shift or change. And, I think the biggest change for me, and it's strange because I didn't walk away from anything 6 months ago except using marijuana as a form of harm reduction. I was ready to like end the relationship that I had with pot. And, I've been probably a regular pot smoker since I was like 16. And when I stepped into recovery from alcohol, smoked. And I was very okay with that, right? If I'm going to choose to do something, and there's a lot of my own belief around the medicinal properties of plants and, just all that kind of stuff. But I'd stepped out of it. And it's not, so to speak, me stepping out like that hasn't been the shift. It's now realizing all of those people that used to smoke with me that are no longer coming around.
Mhm.
And I'm just now sitting here and going like, wow,
Yeah, that's very true.
right? These people that used to hang out on a regular basis, come over, invite me over, and then now I'm like, there are some folks that I haven't seen since I told them. And just kind of, oh, that's interesting, right? I personally feel like it's a, very reflective of when I stepped out of using alcohol, even though I don't feel like I had to break up with it. It's like these other people, I mean, for lack of a better, don't want to be around me because I don't, which is like weird because I have no problem. I, you know, I have an issue with alcohol and people drinking, but I really don't have any issues with people smoking. Mostly because I can see the medicinal property of it. But yeah, that's a weird thing for me to. I don't think I realized that up until like right now, how many of these
Yeah, I can
folks.
think of one person in particular I won't mention, but
Yeah.
yeah, that
Yeah, it's just,
I haven't seen since that
yeah,
time.
yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah,
The energy has been strange, and I do feel like things are shifting. I know last week on my drive, I was able to talk to my friend that's, deep into astrology and human design, and even she validated, like, astrologically speaking, there are big major shifts that are happening. And the good news is for those of us that have been ready to let go, to shed, we'll be in a very good position. For those that have held on, latched on, had some semblance of resistance, so to speak, to make a change, to make a transition, they might be in for a rude awakening. Um, and I'm very grateful because I think in recovery, and I'd love to hear you guys' perspective on this, but I think in recovery, like we're taught to let go. Like we let go of our biggest demon at some point, right? And that is a practice and exercise that we can look back on and know that anytime we see something that's not serving us, yes, we have the ability to continue to let go.
yeah. When we decided to leave the pot behind, I realized I have that skill now that I can step away from something now
Mhm.
that I may not have had before leaving alcohol. I had a lot of relapses when I was trying to leave alcohol, but once I finally did, I kind of have a skill with that now. I can recognize it better, I think,
Hmm.
than before that. Something major changed in me when I let that go, the alcohol. I mean,
I think it frees the spirit.
yeah, and it gives you confidence too, that and courage.
Oh, yeah. What about you, Heather? You got any?
I would agree with that. Since I've given up certain aspects of what I did, but mine was more like mind shopping and workaholic, actually, probably. I found the change has been a lot easier, that I've been able to step away from things or be more conscious of things so that I can step away from things now, where I had a really hard time doing that before.
Yeah. Whether, anybody listening or watching is part of a 12-step program, you've jumped into, leveraging the witch's 13 steps or anything of that nature. It just reminded me like the first thing with the first necessity of any change is admitting what you want to change in the first place, what doesn't work, what doesn't serve you anymore. And I think that being on the path of a recovery, that muscle becomes stronger, being able to see what isn't serving you, right? What's
Hmm.
not, what's causing discomfort and dis-ease versus, happiness and joy, so to speak. Dan and I went this past weekend that I think, for me personally, had a really big impact on some of the shift of this energetic. Because I've been struggling over the last couple of weeks. I've shared in a couple of circles now. I've had more dreams about drinking in the last 2 to 3 weeks than I had in probably the past 5 years. Like almost every day, night is a dream around drinking. Most of them not me, but drinking, like heavy alcohol consumption. And so I really needed to shift something. I saw, got an email from a place nearby that does this. The gentleman does, sound healing using gongs, and he had a shamanic journey scheduled for the solstice using the gongs. And so this past Saturday, Dan and I had signed up for it, and man, did that do
It
something.
worked. It was
Oh yeah.
Man, did it do something. It's not just a matter of, the sound is this amazing healer, but the container and the space that somebody like that holds for you to be able to be present in whatever way that you need to. I found I was called, at some point in it to bring forward every single one of my living relatives and allow that the addiction, like the pain and the suffering that comes from addiction, to burn off of them and to replace it with true peace and contentment. And that was incredible. I can't just to see and to know and to understand that I was there, not just for myself, but for the individuals that are connected to me to also be offered the opportunity to heal. That's the shift of energy that's needed, because to me, it's not just us, it's the people that are around us that energy needs to shift with. It's the people that we're connected to in some way, because when it's just us, man, if a bunch of other people around us are suffering, do you get sucked right back in? How about you, Dan? I know we talked a bit about that
It
experience.
was really good. He did this. He said he was going into some dark depths in the beginning, and then we would gradually um, go up through the shamanic journey and kind of see our higher selves at the end of it. And I had this vision of just walking into my parents' basement from when I was growing up, and like kind of went through all these negative experiences that I had during that time. Saw my dead uncle, and kind of made amends with him, made amends with some folks that aren't there anymore. And then, which I've really needed to do. I didn't realize I've had something just harbored in me, in my mind, and this like shame and guilt that I've been holding on to. And then I was in the water, and I saw Shiva, the Hindu god, and I asked for this like to be cleansed of all this shame and guilt. And I saw this tidal wave coming, like a tsunami wave. And then the sound journey ended, and I didn't get to like fully, like it was before the wave got there, and it kind of dissipated. But yesterday we went to the beach, and I spent all day in the water, and I had that like baptism with my spirit that I needed. It was really beautiful. I had a moment out. I swam way out away from everybody because it was very busy yesterday. It was like 100 degrees here.
Mhm.
And I had a really spiritual experience out there. Just grateful for being alive, and that moment, the water. Like I always say, the beach, you get to experience all four elements there, and it was really cleansing. A really beautiful time. Feels so different today. I got up this morning, and I'm in such a more positive mood. I started painting again, doing some research about some projects I'm going to do, and it's beautiful. It was a really beautiful weekend, really healing and cleansing.
Mhm. Heather, I know you do sound healing. I'm curious about like what's your experience been, whether it's you receiving or even just, with your clients of being able to like shift and, use that beautiful gift for healing when we know just something's not sitting right.
Yeah, you were talking about the gongs, and I wanted to say something about probably 6 months ago now, I think. Me and Sunshine went to one where they had a gong experience too. And I remember there was a shift there, and it was like a short period of time, but it probably wasn't as long as you guys had. But for me, it was quite a shift. But every time I go into my office and do a sound healing, I'm not only healing my clients, I'm also healing myself because I'm also experiencing the tones and frequencies myself. So every time it's kind of like it's both parties receive that. And there's, I've added on to, like, after their sound healing journey, I use tuning forks. That's what I use. We do kind of a meditative state, like a meditation right after it. And I just started doing that. And I found a lot of people were able to get that almost like a closure to the experience of the sound healing, closure into when you go on into the meditation. It's a nice send off to the person that I'm working on. And however they choose to go into the meditative state, we did different types of things. I asked like what they enjoy. And so then I usually on the fly come up with a meditation. And every single time they said it kind of like puts, the frosting on the cake, because it kind of like helps with that extension. So you're already immersed in the sound. And then afterwards, you're able to bring that into yourself as well. So you're able to continue with the closure. And then, I mean, every time that I've worked with people, they always like leave with like a smile, and I feel like they're like really they say they feel very light. That's so having those two elements, I think, since I've added that, I think it's been very helpful, because myself, when I use the vibrations and the tones, when I have that ending part of it, it seems to set everything kind of into place and kind of let it move outwards, as you're leaving the office. It kind of like extends it a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful practice. I mean, I've been very blessed to be able to receive, sound healing from you, which is
Me as well.
yeah, incredible. And I just I just think, in the Recovery Coven chat over the course of the past week, one of the members was literally stating, like, I'm really struggling. And I don't think they're alone. I think so many of us over the course of the last, whether it's couple of weeks, couple of months, I mean, some people may say couple of years, have just been struggling. And so when that happens, we need a toolkit that's going to enable us to shift our energy, that's going to shift the way that we're feeling, shift our emotional state. And, I think we set the intentions that it stays, but you might need another thing in the toolkit. And I will tell you, sound baths, sound healing, sound journeys, frequencies, binaural beats, however it is that you want to consume it, music and sound is a phenomenal way to shift that energetic.
I have an amazing thing I want to share that I do in the morning, and when I go to my gym. They had one of those power plates. I just showed this older lady my little trick the other day. She got a kick out of it. But I tune in the solfeggio frequencies with the vibration of the plate, and I do kind of a little meditation on there in between sets of my workout. And man, it's cool. It's very it sets my mind in a different place. It's really neat. I didn't read about it. I just figured out how to do it. You can actually feel your body kind of tune to the vibration of it with the sound. It's really cool.
I love the solfeggio scale. It's one of my favorite scales to use when I'm doing my healing on my clients. You definitely feel a difference in the tones and the frequencies is pretty phenomenal. These things have been around for thousands of years. The solfeggio has been, back to where you were talking about monks and stuff when they were doing the intonations and the chants. It's kind of based back that far. So it was really phenomenal that you can tell the difference in the client as well. Like when you start with a different set and then you move on to the solfeggio, there's a completely different change in range and motion of things. Oh, my cat's in here. But yeah, so I agree. Solfeggio, I think, kind of sets the icing on the cake, I think, on, if you're going to extend on and continue and allow it to merge with you, I think the solfeggio is a really good path to use.
Mm. Well, hopefully folks that are listening have had experience, but if you have not, please do me a favor, find a sound healer, find a sound bath, find a sound journey, go on to Spotify, look up these frequencies. You can literally put in solfeggio frequencies and find all sorts of them and give them a try. Give them a try. You will be impressed. I'll give the caveat that say if you can do them with headphones, they're a bit more potent.
I think it's,
Mhm.
unless you have it really loud
Yeah.
on a speaker, like really loud, I don't think there's any comparison to
Yeah.
having headphones.
Yeah.
No, it's better to have, yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, all right. I think we're good for today. You guys feeling good?
Yeah.
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 Once again to everyone, we're going to be back. We're going to try to do this every week. It might take me a couple of weeks to get the everything handled well, but just bear with, be patient. And, just thanks again for tuning into the Sober Witch Life. We're here to have a conversation around magical recovery. And so, if you are on your own magical path and have stepped into or want to step into recovery, you found the right place. We're super glad that you did. So until next time, dear friends, have a beautiful, beautiful week. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Everybody.
See ya.